Head coach that I've been knowing 20, 25 years. Very special guy to me. One of the good guys in the college basketball coaching profession. He's a guy that, one of the few guys who, although he did not coach me, he's impacted my life and the things I do in a number of ways. I first met him, I was 16 years old. He was assistant coach at the University of Texas. And again, he left a valuable mark on me even when I was 16 years old. He started his coaching career out at Niagara University in the early 90s. He went on to St. Bonaventure where he played. He was assistant at Rutgers. He also was assistant at Texas where I first met him. Then he left Texas, became the head coach at Siena. And then from there, he was assistant at Virginia, Florida, back at Texas, back again at Tennessee with Rick Barnes. And then he became the head coach at Georgia State in 2019 and just got hired recently. It's his first year at SMU. My guy, Rob Lanier. Rob, appreciate you coming, stopping by Sloan Cold Facts. I know you're a busy man. How you doing?
Doing great, man. Happy to be here and excited about all the things you're doing, man.
Appreciate that.
That's phenomenal.
I appreciate that. Coach called me today earlier. He said he was unhappy with his first practice at SMU, and he had his guys go again. Coach, let's kind of talk about SMU. Obviously, great location, Dallas, Texas, a hotbed of recruiting right now, arguably the hottest city in the country. With your background of coaching and recruiting high-level guys, what does it mean for you to be back in a Lone Star State in a recruiting hotbed like Dallas?
Yeah, everything happens so fast in this profession, and this came out of nowhere, and it's amazing. I talk to young coaches all the time, this, about the importance of developing, nurturing, and kind of protecting your reputation. And fortunately for me, there were enough people saying enough good things about me that when we had some success at Georgia State, it led to an opportunity, like I said, that I didn't see coming. But I knew a little bit about SMU through my time in Austin. And one of the neat things, and you and I talked a little bit about my background in the game as a player.
Right.
We had that conversation
we'll for sure touch on that. Yeah.
And one of the things, I grew up admiring the Big East Conference. Okay. When I was in high school, the Big East was just getting, going. Pearl Washington, Patrick Ewing. College basketball obviously was different at that time. But in the Northeast, in the league that I played in, the Atlantic 10, the fervor around college basketball was different.
Yeah. And
when I got to Texas, we were battling from a recruiting standpoint. When I met you, we were battling this perception of Texas being a football school.
Correct.
And I remember in 2000 and maybe 12 or 13, I don't know the year, but when Larry Brown was at SMU, I just remember turning on the TV one night and seeing Moody Coliseum and saying to myself, man, what is going on over there? Because it was different than anything that I had seen on a college level in the state. It had reminded me of the old Big East and the Atlantic 10 that I grew up admiring. So I had a curiosity about SMU. I knew about the talent in Dallas and Houston and throughout the state, and I knew about the big universities in the state, but I hadn't seen anything like SMU, which reminded me of St. Joe's and St. Bonaventure and these places that I was used to. So there was always a curiosity. So when I got the call, I was excited. Like, yeah, I really want to learn more about this and see if everything else at the university aligned with my spirit and my values as a coach and as a man. And I did find that to be the case, and they felt mutually. Yeah. And here we are.
Yeah. Obviously, with me playing at TCU, being a private school in the Metroplex, actually SMU was the first school ever to recruit me. So education was really big for my family, as you know, my parents. And so with me graduating from TCU and also, getting recruited by SMU, the private school feel was important. Obviously, the approximation to Houston was important. But I took a visit on campus to SMU, and I was blown away, with the beauty of the campus, how small it was, and it made me feel like although I was at a big university, it was small enough to I felt like I could be taken care of, and I felt safe there. It was a situation to where I knew it could like change my life if I decided to go to SMU, and also it was a big reason why I chose TCU because it was very similar. So of course, talk about just like you mentioned previously, being a smaller like a private school university, but still having that big time feel. You mentioned the games and Moody being on TV. I remember last year, 2 years ago, you turned on the SMU game and playing Houston or Memphis. Mm-hmm. You got the Bush family in the stands and Mark Cuban there and big time guys in Dallas in the media and politics. So with it being kind of in the center of Dallas, talk about so far. Since you've been there, some of the things you've noticed as far as like the campus and the smaller classroom sizes and how that is a benefit to some kids.
Yeah, everything from the press conference forward, mm-hmm. the magnitude of the people that have a vested interest in it, and I think kind of what you're touching on there is so many people come through places like this and have such a tremendous experience.
Right.
They go on to have tremendous success for themselves personally, and they want to give back to the institution, and that's what I mean when I say a really vested interest mm-hmm. in the school. I've had an opportunity to have coffee with President Bush, mm-hmm. And I've met some really influential people who happen to be alums of the institution, and those that are really influential who just have an interest. Yeah. Because, and even in President Bush's case, his wife went here, but he still feels that allegiance and put his library here on the campus. Mm-hmm. So it is something special about private schools because so many people come through institutions like this and have a great experience, and by virtue of that have success beyond and want to give back. And I think SMU is probably an elite example of that. And one of the things we want to do is we want the program to reflect that. We want to lean into what makes SMU special. I think it's a place that offers you an opportunity to compete at a high level without compromise. And so we think there's enough really good players who want to get an education that are competitive like yourself. And we got to do a good job of finding those young people.
I think again, Coach is not his first time on Sloan Cold Facts. He actually was one of our first guests initially when we did it during COVID on Instagram Live. He was we had a head coaches week, and Coach was the first head coach. And during that interview, we also talked about the 40-year decision, kind of what you just alluded to, the private school decision of getting a private school degree at a school like SMU, what that does for kids, especially Texas kids, going forward. I always tell people, talking to parents, with my job with the scouting service, I tell them, where does your kid want to, he'll probably end up living back in Texas when he's done. And so for you to have a degree from a school like a SMU, TCU, it's so valuable to where people say, oh, he was an SMU basketball player. He got a degree from SMU, that he kind of gets put in certain rooms and certain conversations to whereas other places he wouldn't,
Yeah, you know what? Texas has been like a home for me. My son was born in Austin, and my family's had such a great experience. And I said this on day one, that people who know me know that how I feel about the state. Mm-hmm. This is really like a home for me. And I didn't see this coming, like I said. So when I was in Atlanta, I was happy. I was like, man, I could be in Atlanta the rest of my life. I'd be good. Yeah. And then SMU called, and I said, well, I feel the same way about Dallas and the state of Texas. So I do believe that this is a place with 3 of the top 15 largest cities in the country are right here in the state. Actually, 4 of them, if you count Austin. Yeah. And so there's so much commerce, there's so much opportunity. Everything you want, you can find in the state of Texas. Pretty much everything you want, you can find just about in any of the major cities in the state.
Correct.
So it would make sense that young people who go away would end up coming back. I've always felt that every kid that goes through the process of trying to find a place to go to school should establish a checklist. And if they can check all of those boxes on and off the court at a school, that is in their home state, then why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
But I never think that you make the decision based on geography first.
Mm-hmm.
You find the fit, and if the fit can keep you where your family can be an active part of that journey with you, then that is the optimal thing to do. But you should never compromise on your checklist because of the geography.
Right.
And I do think the challenge for us, because there's so much talent, is to find the young people whose boxes we check. Otherwise, you might get a good player, but you might not be moving your program forward.
Mm-hmm.
Because kids who come to your program who are from home, who don't have a good experience, they take that energy back into their community, and it erodes the fabric of your program.
Yeah.
So the challenge for us is to find the right guys who can flourish on and off the court and beyond school at SMU.
Yeah.
So, Coach, when you talk about fit, I think that's a big word that's kind of going on in the landscape and is very prevalent right now. When you talk about fit, two things: one for SMU specifically, but just in general. When you talk about fit for the kids out there, what does that really mean to you? And then secondly, for SMU, what is the type of fit, the type of culture that you guys are looking forward to, on and off the court, that is the right player that you may be looking for, or will help grow your program?
Yeah, well, there's a personal piece to that, and then there's the athletic piece, right? And personally, I think for young people, if you're not serious about school, then we're probably not going to be a great fit, So you want kids that value education, and I think, you mentioned the word landscape. With all the talk about the portal and NIL and all of these things, I'm an advocate for all of that stuff. That stuff is great. But wrapped in all of that is still the importance of guys getting an education, and I think somehow within the narrative, the reality of that has been diminished. But the fact of the matter, we grew up with this notion that it's such a small percentage of guys who make it.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't changed.
No.
There's still the same amount of jobs up there, right? Mm-hmm. So education still needs to be important for the vast majority of guys. So if education is important, then the quality of that education is important, and the kind of relationships that you connect yourself to while you're going through that journey become valuable. So here's a place like we talked about where there's so many people to connect yourself with in a place filled with opportunities. Mm-hmm. So people who value education, number one. So from an academic standpoint, but the other part from a basketball standpoint is the sensibilities of the coach, not just style of play and all of that. You got all of those basketball factors. How do you play, and which players are you attracted to that will fit into how you play and flourish? So we could talk more about that. And then my thing is, I generally, like I was having a discussion on a Zoom because I'm a part of this one committee, and we were having this discussion about young people and what's starting to happen now. Like, I don't even know what a Gen Z or millennial, I don't understand half that stuff, like what the difference, right? But what I do understand is that I always hear people of my generation, you guys, I'm a little bit older than you guys, that we talk about young people today in a certain way, like they got different wiring, there's a different DNA there.
Feel different.
Mm-hmm. And I don't believe in that.
Mm-hmm.
What I believe is that the world has changed that they're growing up in, because if we were growing up in the world, we'd have some of the same undesirable behaviors that they exhibit, right? Sure. It ain't their fault that Steve Jobs did this, right? But they're a byproduct of it. And because they're a byproduct of it, we have to find different and more creative ways to reach them. But once you reach them, they ain't no different than us. Mm-hmm. It's just harder to get in there. Yeah. So I happen to be old enough to be romantic about the way it used to be. Mm-hmm. I'm also young enough to be cool with the challenge that's in front of me. Mm-hmm. And I embrace it. So because of that, I'm trying to find young people that I can love. Mm-hmm. Because I still love these young people. And I'm trying to find the ones that I think I could do the best job reaching, so that they can play our style. Mm-hmm. and they can get an education at our place. So for me, fit is not just like something that you can just pin down. It's a feeling through the relationship that you build. And it's also being able to be honest with people and see where it goes. Like, if I see a young man that I love, but I know on the makeup of my team, he won't play right away, I'm going to tell him that. And if he's good with that, we're going to move forward. If he likes that vision. And if he doesn't, then he told the truth, we told the truth, we're aligned even though we're not going to be together. So fit doesn't fit into a great definition. There is some feel to it, but like I always say, you know it when you see it.
Yeah. Coach, you talked about challenges as far as coaching today's kids. What are some of the challenges you foresee or even that you have now recruiting kids in this era, coaching kids in this era as opposed to 15, 10, 20 years ago?
Like I said, similar. But if you can do a good job finding like alignment with people, I think the big challenge to your question is expectations. Like, so when I say alignment, is like, how do your expectations of what it's going to look like for you match with the way we view you? And sometimes when there's a lack of alignment there, you can make the mistake of still pushing forward to get it done and navigate it in a way that allows you to get the job done, and then that young man is on your campus, but you were never aligned. And what we've tried to do is take the approach that we're not going to recruit out of fear. We're going to recruit from the transfer portal, but we're not going to be afraid to recruit high school kids on the basis that we think they might transfer if they have some success. What we're going to do is try to find relationships with people and allow those relationships to drive the decisions that we make. And there's so many kids like in this area and through the state that they're going to be 2 or 3 of them that are just perfect and would blossom with us. So I don't think the challenges have changed in terms of the coaching part. Trying to identify guys that fit you has gotten much more challenging. And I think we have to dig deeper. I remember when I was at Florida, Billy Donovan, he was interesting because, you know, he had that team with Joe Noah and Al Horford and these guys. And these guys were aliens.
Yeah.
You know, Joe Noah is going to be the #1 pick in the draft and decides to return. Ain't nobody doing that.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I felt like Billy didn't want to stay in college is because he knew he was never going to have a group like that again. That was never going to happen. A whole team decided, no, we're going to turn down the NBA and millions of dollars and come back to try to win it again.
Yeah.
Who's doing that?
Yeah, nobody. Yeah.
And I don't think he enjoyed college coaching very much after that. You know what I mean? And so he was always trying to figure out, like, how can we get inside these guys and figure out who they really are? It's hard, but it really has driven my approach to recruiting. And we were fortunate at places like Tennessee. We had all 3 stars and became #1 in the country. In a 4-year period, we beat Kentucky 6 times. And they ain't have no 3 stars. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was about us. There ain't no exact science, and we weren't perfect, but we found some guys that fit what we were doing. And so we just try to do it like that, and we try to look at the glass as half full.
Coach, I'm going to take it back for you. You mentioned earlier you played at St. Bonaventures in the A-10. During your time in college, we talked about this before also, there was at some point you realized the NBA might not materialize for me. On my podcast a couple episodes ago, I talked about how basketball guys, sometimes they struggle with the transition, and they struggle with what's next, and they even struggle with getting back into the game, being able to coach or do media or scouting, even articulate the knowledge that they have. When you were playing at St. Bonnie's, what was the turning point for you when you realized that I think this NBA thing might not work for me? I might want to get into coaching. And then what kind of turned to, you know what, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm a coach.
Yeah, you know, we did talk about it, and it was a specific thing, actually. I was a sophomore, and we were playing at Syracuse. And I had a good game, 13 points, 5 assists. But on the court, Ronnie Cycli, Derek Coleman, Sherman Douglas,
dudes,
Stevie Thompson, and some other dudes. And I remember specifically in the game, my coach was yelling at me to make Sherman Douglas go left. You know, remember Sherman Douglas? He was like heavy right-handed. And I remember saying to myself, not to my coach, but I remember him saying, "Man, you make him do it." You know, and there's a play that stands out to me actually, because I thought I made a nice move. You know, they play in the zone. If you can imagine the zone with Cycli and Coleman.
Very long.
And I got by the front line, and I had a guy on my hip, and I like shot a little floater. And I remember the crowd going crazy, and my teammates said, "Come on, man, take the ball out." It's our ball. I mean, the ball got knocked out of bounds by Cycli or one of those guys. And I just remember this feeling of like me trying so hard to do the simplest things because these guys were different. Like they really were talent-wise. It was just such another level. And it was a little bit of a blessing for me because I think, to your point, there's so many guys who are talented enough to continue to entertain the delusion of the NBA. And fortunately for me, I wasn't talented enough to trick myself. I was competitive and I worked really hard, but I got off the dream maybe that night.
How hard was that for you?
It was easy. It was easy. It was you know, because, you know, without getting into my entire background and all, I won't bore you with all of that, but I certainly grew up with a mindset that I was going to change my circumstances somehow, some way.
Now, speak on that, Coach, because I think that it's so important, especially in today's society where you have these young kids and even the college decision, they don't realize that that college decision can change the fortune of their kids that they don't even know that they're going to have, and their grandkids, and if they're lucky enough, their parents even, right? But I think for you, you know, like you said, like your background, we talked about this, because of your background, it made you think differently, and you move differently because of that. But not to cut you off, but go ahead.
Well, you know, the thing is, I did develop a goal of wanting to get to the NBA like young people, and I worked at it. And it got me to a point where I could play Division I basketball and have a certain measure of success. But it wasn't my dream. I wasn't dreaming about making the NBA. I was just a hooper who wanted to, you know, do that. But I was thinking beyond that, and my dream was to have my own family. That was my biggest dream, because I didn't have a traditional upbringing. And I wanted to experience the things that I had either seen on TV or other people that I knew had that I didn't get a chance to touch. And I wanted to have that for myself. And so somehow, some way, I was going to make that a reality, whether it was basketball or something else. I was always a good student. I was always responsible. And I had been making my own decisions since I was 9 or 10 years old, and I had to. So I was the first person in my family to graduate middle school. And so there was a certain determination and focus that I had at a very young age under some unique circumstances. And so because of that, I always felt like I could come to Austin and not know anybody in the state and forge the kind of relationships that I've been able to. And the same thing when I went to Gainesville, or when I went to Knoxville, where I didn't have any background in that area, but I knew that as a person that I was going to work hard enough and be honest enough with people that I could forge some real relationships and have some success in my profession. And so when I was a senior, and I knew I wasn't going to be a pro, I was already putting a resume together even while the season was going on. And I was sending out my resume to every school in the country. And I decided that I wanted to at least pursue a graduate degree, and I wanted to do it as a graduate assistant so that I could explore a career in coaching. And then when I got to Niagara University, I was given a lot of responsibility at a very young age by a very young head coach at the time by the name of Jack Armstrong. And Jack was 27 when he became the interim coach at Niagara because the head coach got fired in November of that year. So he finished the season, got the interim tag removed, and then hired me as a GA at 21 years old in July.
After your senior year?
After my senior year. At 22, I was the strength coach. I was the academic coordinator. I was working on a master's degree, and I was making $3,200.
Total?
Total. For the year.
For 12 months?
For 12 months. Yeah. And I did that for 2 years. And so, but during that time, I was up at 6 a.m. making these guys work out. Then they went to class, I went to the office, and I was helping with recruiting and doing all that. In the afternoon, I was a part of practice. And at 7 p.m., I was doing study hall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was working on a master's degree for myself.
So when you go to class?
I went during the day when they went to class.
Okay.
Yeah. So so I did that for 2 years, and I got my master's degree. And I always, like I was saying, I talk about reputation to young people. This is something that really influenced me. So when I was at Niagara, we used to have these cubicles. So the office setting was such that, you know how the office cubicles are?
Yeah.
So the assistant coaches were in cubicles, but the head coaches, he had an office.
Yeah.
So my cubicle was next to his office. So early evening, late afternoon, I don't know what day it was, I came into my cubicle while he was in his office, but he didn't know I was in there. I heard his phone ring and I heard him pick it up. And I didn't know who was on the other end, but the conversation was about me. And from his end, he was saying things that were very complimentary about me, the contribution that I had made to the program, and what my future would look like. And it was about a job. And in that moment, I learned about reputation. He did not know I was sitting there. And he could have said to the guy, he's not ready for the job, he doesn't work hard enough, whatever. But what he was saying is, yes, he can do that. He's one of the best I've been around. The guys are going to love him. The people on campus are going to love him. He's going to be a star one day. This is what the guy is saying about me. As soon as he hung up, my phone rings, and it's the coach at St. Bonaventure. I want you to come down and interview, and the next day I had the job.
And now, was that your same coach that you played for, or no?
No.
Oh,
no, it was a different guy. That's why he was asking all these questions. He was the new coach.
I got you. Okay.
But he was an alum from the 70s. And he's calling my current boss to tell me about Rob Lanier. But I'm hearing just the other side of the conversation. And then he calls me. I drive down the next day. It's an hour and a half away. They interview me and they hire me the next day. And
that's how you got started.
That story and how I met Rick Barnes are really the two things that taught me everything I need to know about reputation.
Coach, speaking of Rick Barnes, I met you in the summer of '99, and so you were the assistant at Texas then. You mentioned earlier how Texas was a football school, which I'm a Houstonian, born and raised, and I know about James Brown and Ricky Williams and the Texas football lore. You're in a situation to where you come into Texas and they ask you to help turn the basketball program around at a football school that basketball had some success before in the early '90s with T. Wrench and those guys, and even in the '80s with Lance Blanks and those guys. So for you guys to kind of push the culture forward and kind of push Texas basketball forward, how big of a task was that for you?
You know what, man? For me, like I can't take too much credit for that. I mean, I think Rick Barnes is a unique person in our profession. He's a difference maker. He's a game changer. You know, people can be critical, but what happens is people are generally critical of people who are really successful that they ain't successful enough. You know, and people are critical of KD.
Yes.
Be critical of LeBron.
Yeah, which is crazy.
So if you're really, really good, then, well, you didn't win it all. So you can't win the big one. You know, that means that you doing something.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of assistants have come and gone under Rick Barnes, but he keep doing it.
Yeah.
So What I had was a unique opportunity as a young guy who worked really hard, who felt like I was a good enough communicator and persuasive enough that I could get people to see things my way.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like that was a strength that I had either as a coach or as a recruiter. And what happened is that summer I saw TJ Ford and I was obsessed.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah, I do.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
I was obsessed with this dude, and I didn't know who John Urie was. You know what I mean? We all know now. But
we all know now.
but I was obsessed.
Yeah.
I mean, the first, I saw him at ABCD.
Yeah. That was our rising junior summer.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that was it. And what I did was I took my wife right away to see him play.
Mm-hmm.
When Willow Ridge was playing, they would be playing at the field houses because the games were so packed.
Yeah.
So I remember talking to my wife because she heard me on the phone shouting at John Urie one night.
Mm-hmm.
And she like, who is that? I was like, it's this dude. He wild. But you'll meet him one day.
Yeah.
So I drove up and I wanted her to see how good TJ was so she could understand what I was obsessed about.
Mm-hmm.
So we went and we met John right away.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, oh, I see why you were young. It's all good, you know what I mean? And then TJ did, he was doing
TJ.
what he does, and so she was always then intrigued, like, how's it going with this TJ?
Yeah.
And I was focused on it and was trying to find creative ways to distinguish us from the other schools. And it's funny because there came a point where I didn't think Coach really thought we could get him.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys were playing in Long Beach at the pump thing at the end of the summer against Aaron Miles.
Portland Legends. He was
Right?
crazy. Let me give a background to that first. First two, I gotta tell the story I always tell them, everybody laugh about. Rob Lanier. I'd heard his name, and I've seen him in passing with a burnt orange jumpsuit, and so he followed us our entire summer, our last summer, even the summer before, and even back up, Coach. That recruiting class before, James Thomas, Royal Ivy, Brandon Mouton, Brian Boddicker, Jason Klotz, was a cornerstone also of that Final Four group. But so, Coach followed us all summer, and we were in Las Vegas at the Big Time tournament. Adidas used to do a Big Time tournament in Vegas. It was a huge deal. It was hundreds of coaches. And so we're playing in the game, and we're warming up, layup line, and then all of a sudden in the corner of the of my eye, I see Coach standing up, and he's kind of standing up with his hands on his hips. So we're warming up. We're used to playing in front of coaches. And then Coach unzips his sweatsuit. It's a burnt orange sweatsuit. He unzips his sweatsuit, and he has a Willow Ridge High School PE shirt on. It says Willow Ridge PE. And so we look, and everyone stops, and we look, and we was like, yo, how the fuck did he get a Willow Ridge PE shirt? Like, this is in, and so we all look at TJ, and he has this big grin on his face. And now, like Coach said at the time, I mean, it's Arizona, it's Georgetown, it's Kansas, I mean, it's everybody. He's the #1 point guard in the country. So, like, T has this big smile on his face, and my mind is blown. I'm like, yo, he has to go to Texas.
No, that's crazy.
Like, how did he get some of the guys on our team who went to Willow Ridge didn't have a Willow Ridge PE shirt.
Shout out to Mary Ford.
And he had a Willow Ridge PE shirt on. So when he unzips his jacket and he has a gray and blue Willow Ridge shirts on, like PE shirt on, like in my mind I think like, oh yeah, he's going to Texas. There's no way he's not going to Texas. And so Coach mentioned the Portland Legends game versus Aaron Miles. So John Urie, who was our first guest on the Sloan Cold Facts podcast, he's notorious for, what's the word I want to use? Boasting of proclaiming his guys as the best in the country. Like if people think who they see on social media John Urie is now, it's nothing to what he was back then 20 years ago. So we walk in the gym in Long Beach, California to play against the Portland Legends. They have Aaron Miles, and his backcourt mate ended up going to Kansas too, Aaron Lee. They're a really good team. It's the Elite Eight. They're from Portland, Oregon, which is not that far from Long Beach. We're from Houston. John Urie walks in the gym first and screams at the top of his lungs, TJ Ford is the best point guard in the country, walking past Aaron Miles and his whole team. So now we're like, oh shit, it's okay. It's about to be one of those days. And so in that game, TJ put on a master class. Like, I mean, he was probably the best I've ever seen him play. He left no doubt after the game he was the best point guard in the country. And we probably had easily 100 schools at that game. And so after that game, I kind of looked at TJ and I looked at all the guys and this, all the coaches. I'm thinking to myself like, yo, this dude is he's really like that.
Story about that though. So up to that point, because that's towards the end of July.
It is, yep.
Rick was skeptical that we could get him.
Mm-hmm.
Thought we were kind of wasting our time, and I was fighting with him.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like we were strong because I was everywhere. Every hotel y'all was at, 100%. I was at every airport, every. And so I felt like we had real traction, right? So Roy Williams is sitting there, Rick is sitting there, I'm sitting here. That game.
Yep.
And TJ is dancing.
Yeah, he is.
And he normally not really scoring.
Yeah, he went like for 36. It was. He went at Aaron. It was a statement.
Right.
He made a statement that game.
Roy Williams turns to Rick and goes, "Sounds like y'all might be getting a good one." And Rick, the whole time, Rick is like, we're kind of spinning our wheels on this one.
Yeah.
And then Roy Williams says to him, "Man, you guys are getting a good one." And then Rick turns to me and goes, "Yeah, Rob's done a hell of a job." and then Rick turned up, and they built, and then he and TJ
built the relationship.
Yeah.
No, you and I actually built a relationship because you were so close to us. Actually, it's like, yo, I'm seeing this man everywhere. Like, he's in our hotel, and it's almost like the movies. Like, when you're eating, the guy just pops up everywhere. He's like eating, like, damn, there's Coach again. Keep walking in the hallway, Coach Lanier again. Like, it's almost like, yo, like, he's everywhere. And so it's funny because he and I actually kind of built a rapport and relationship through him recruiting TJ. It's funny, no man, but that moment that you with the Willow Ridge shirt, something none of us probably will forever forget. Right, and so that kind of is a thing that how you were as close to us kind of probably will bond us forever. And like, honestly, Coach, I tell people, yourself and Buzz Williams are two guys, I said earlier, who, although they did not coach me at all, they have impacted my life and the things I do. Just watching you with your family, watching you in this profession, watching you always be who you are. The reputation, you spoke about reputation, always having been the same person and your reputation preceding you, like, yo, Rob Lanier's a great guy, he's a family man, he's a good basketball coach, he's a good person. And so me, being a young man, like, coming up in the game and doing the events in the event space and in the evaluation space, just watching you with your family has helped me with my family. And even you and I have talked about different things that can help me in my profession. You didn't coach me 1 minute, 1 second, but I want to give you your flowers and give you your props for who you are as a person, and not only what you've done for me, but the countless other young men who you coach. And I want to say I appreciate you, and I thank you for sure.
No, I appreciate you, man, and the example that you said, and you were talking about, my playing career or whatever. But I take particular notice of people who make the transition that you've made and celebrate family. I don't know how you be traveling, where you be going. I'll be seeing you in bubble baths and shit, But just the fact that so many people are getting so many messages out there about family and marriage, and so many young people think that playing the game on the court is the only way to be successful.
Correct. Yeah.
I remember I was telling this story to. We had I won't say his name, but when I was at Florida, we had a young man who was a McDonald's All-American, who was gonna be one and done.
Okay.
I mean, he was gonna go straight out of high school, but they changed the rule the year he was coming out. And he went to a Big East school, and he played behind 2 NBA players and didn't play right away. And he went from a guy who was going to be at least one and done, but he was going to be out of high school.
Yeah.
And then he transferred to us at Florida, and we were sitting at my house, me, him, Jay Lucas, my son, my daughter, and Chandler Parsons, sitting in my living room. And I said to him, who do you think's happier, me or Kevin Garnett? I just floated that question to him. A young person, he goes,
Kevin Garnett.
Kevin Garnett.
Yeah.
I said, okay, what do you mean by that? I mean, he got everything. I was like, so did I. You see my family here, my wife, I'm doing what I love. Why would he be happier than me? I don't understand. Explain this to me. 10 years later, he had a cup of coffee in the league, played in Europe, bought a home, got 2 children of his own, beautiful wife, beautiful family. He calls me, this is a couple months ago. Remember we were talking about in your living room? Yeah, I know what you're talking about now. And that's what we want young people to learn. That's what you represent by what you're doing. And I love and pay particular attention to people who make the transition. Dre Foster is on my staff. Super talented.
Kid,
yeah, but like this dude, if he wants to be a college head coach one day, he got it. If he wants to be an NBA head coach, he just, once he finds that passion, but he's a super talented dude. And I just love seeing guys who make the transition and set that example and then celebrate family and marriage, you know, like, because there's so many other competing images and messaging out there that anytime you have someone that's given the what I consider the right message, I really appreciate that. So
I appreciate you, Coach.
Kudos to you.
Coach, before we go, you just to kind of let the people know, you have coached and recruited McDonald's All-Americans. You said 3-star guys who became first-round draft picks. You've been around some high-level basketball in your coaching career. Who are, I always ask guys, it's kind of like the Sloan Cold facts. I need 5 guys who, in your opinion, are the 5 best players you've ever coached.
All right. Well, you know, I didn't coach TJ
At all.
Never coached.
Oh, you took the Sienna job.
Yeah. I didn't get to coach Bradley Beal. I left and came back to Texas. So those are 2 that would have been on the list that I was involved in recruitment. I'll go back to Niagara. We had a kid by the name of, you know, this is someone that you wouldn't be familiar with, but he was one of the most uniquely talented players I ever been around. His name was Brian Clifford. He was 6'8".
Oh, played in Europe?
He did play in Europe.
Oh, so
he was 6'8". I don't know if he could dunk a basketball. I never seen him do it, and I don't believe he could. He was the most uniquely gifted player that I'd ever seen. He did everything wrong. You know what I mean? Like, as soon as he catches it, he starts dribbling, spinning, in traffic, and you couldn't do anything about it. He was shooting floaters at 6'8" when guys really weren't shooting like floaters like that. And he was an unbelievable passer with one hand. You know, back then we were like, don't pass with one hand, don't pass it across. You know, like he did everything against what you teach, and he was just unbelievably effective player. And he was a winner, and he was super tough, and people just couldn't stop him. It was almost comical. You know what I mean? It was like a poor man's like Jokic is now in 1990, 91, like 92, like back then. And so he wasn't a great pro, but he was a tremendous player in that particular way. And I'm just thinking of guys that come to mind that might not necessarily be household names, but they were difference makers. You know, David Vanderpool was a great player at St. Bonaventure. He was a 6'4", 6'5" point guard, all conference. Back at a time when UMass was #1 in the country.
Marcus Camby.
Temple was really good with John Chaney and those guys. He was the guy that helped us uplift that program and change the fortunes of a program that had for many years been really, really down. And he came in and helped change and created respect. So on the scale of what we were trying to build, he was so impactful. Sean Singletary.
Virginia.
At Virginia, cold-blooded. cold-blooded. You know, got his jersey retired on senior night.
Yeah.
You know, he had a microfracture injury on his hip that shortened his NBA career, but he was a tremendous talent. Chandler Parsons was Player of the Year in the SEC his senior year, and he was a guy that you guys are familiar with. He played with Dallas and Houston, and you know, it's hard to just say 5 guys. You know, like Maurice Spates was a terrific player. Yeah, you know, he had a great pro career. But Nick Calathis was the most gifted passer that I had ever seen or been around.
Big time EuroLeague guy.
Yeah, I'll probably go beyond 5, but I will just add one more guy to that. You know, and again, it's sort of like maybe some recency, but 2 more guys. You know, because Miles Turner is a lottery pick and a really good player, but Grant Williams, man, what a great. You know, like Miles probably a better pro, but Grant was a better college player. You know, SEC Player of the Year, back-to-back years. Now you can think about anytime you're in a league with Kentucky, and there's other great programs and players in the league, but he was at 19 years old Player of the Year, and at 20 years old Player of the Year again. And you know, a dominant player that led the program to #1, and we got him over Yale and Harvard. I'm sorry, Yale and Princeton. And so it goes back to that discussion we were having about fit and alignment. You know, here was a guy where academics was important, but he wanted to be a pro, and he felt like Tennessee was the best opportunity for him to do that for whatever reason. And so, but it's hard to just stop at 5 because there's so many good players that I've been blessed to coach.
Coach, we appreciate you. Really, man. Like I said, I can't give you enough flowers. I know you're going to do tremendous things at SMU. I think they are beyond fortunate to have you. Parents, when y'all watch this guy is a leader of young men. He will take care of your son. He will make your son a better man, make him a better person. Coach Rob Lanier, we appreciate you, man. Thank you for joining us.
Appreciate it, Coach.
Yes, sir. My man.
Appreciate you. Yeah, love you too, Coach.